Welcome to a wonderful interview here today. The topic is going to be how to reset your genes to feel happier and calmer, feel younger, and reverse age-related diseases. And today I have Dr. Sara Gottfried with us. Welcome, Dr. Sara.
Hi, Trudy. Hi, everyone. Happy to be with you.
It's so great. I'm going to just give a little bit of information about you for people who may not know who you are, although I'm sure most people do know who you are already with your other wonderful books, The Hormone Cure and The Hormone Reset Diet. Dr. Sara Gottfried is a Harvard-educated physician, speaker, and author of these two New York Times best-selling books that I just mentioned. She's got a new book coming out, Younger, a breakthrough program to reset your genes, reverse aging, and turn back the clock 10 years. And I am just so excited to be interviewing you for this. I had an advanced review copy, and after reading it, this is what I said. It's a brilliant book. It's mesmerizing, cutting edge, and a must read. And I love the healthy mix of science and the gene information, together with the really simple assessment tools and the powerful lifestyle changes that you teach on how we can turn the good genes on and turn our bad genes off. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I'd love to just start with hearing how you went from writing these books about hormones to going to this topic on aging and why you're interested in this topic.
Well, I failed a test. That's what got me interested, Trudy. You know, the truth is that I spent my 30s and my early 40s really working on natural hormone balancing for women and men. And that was my first two books. But I did a simple blood test when I was 44. I went to the lab and I had my telomeres checked. And telomeres are those little caps on your chromosomes that are a marker of biological aging. So they reflect your cellular aging as opposed to your chronological age. And I failed the test. So what I found out was that at age 44, I had the telomeres of a 64-year-old woman.
Wow.
And I was just devastated about this. So at that point, I feel like I know that my hormones were in balance, but there was a cost to my hormones being out of balance, probably dating back to my 20s and 30s when I had, my residency training, my medical training, and 2 kids and the sleep deprivation that goes with that, work stress of having my own clinic. And I was in a failure state. So I remember coming home that day that I got the results and sharing it with my husband. And I was like, I've got to do something about this. The hormones take you so far. They only take you so far. They get you to a place of, I think kind of rolling with the punches better and feeling so much better, feeling stronger. But they're not everything. There's still some issues that I certainly had to deal with. And that's what led to this book.
Wonderful. So you're taking it to the next level. Something that I love that you talk about is this term called healthspan. Tell us what this is, because I think it's such an important aspect of what you teach in this book.
Well, healthspan is defined as the period of time that you feel fantastic, like you're in your prime. And free of disease, relatively free of disease, especially the chronic diseases that will kill you, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's disease. So health span is this really important focus. And for me, honestly, Trudy, I didn't think a lot about health span until I was facing the big 50. I just turned 50 last week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. It feels really good. But I had some fear that came up. I had some anxiety that came up. And I realized that I want to take that feeling of time is no longer on my side and to transmute it. I want to turn it into, I want to catalyze, a way of being really happy and content with the aging process, and to do everything I can to take this prime of life and extend it as long as possible, to take the best of middle age and lengthen that, not lengthen that feeling of being, in your 90s and using a walker. Like, that's not what I want to lengthen. I want to lengthen the way I feel right now.
Wonderful. And you just had a great trip for your 50th to Hawaii, didn't you?
I did. I was thinking about you, Trudy, because I walked on the beach every day, which I think resets your adrenal system. It calms down your HPA axis, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's a form of earthing. The sound of the waves is so meditative. It helps to increase my vagal tone, which I hope we'll talk about today.
Yes.
And there's something about the weather, the vitamin D, the sunshine, it just is so syntonic with my nervous system. And, I left the Bay Area, which is also beautiful, as you know, but it was raining and kind of in the 30s, and just landing in Maui, you just feel this warm wash of like love and grace. It's grace.
Love it. So healing. And I hear you. I'm an ocean person myself, and I love the beach and the waves and the nature. And this is something that you talk about in the book, and you teach about some conditions that actually steal our youth, and it actually makes us age more quickly. And one of them is, getting sufficient vitamin D, feeling stressed out. So doing something like going on a trip to Hawaii or doing something else, it doesn't have to be Hawaii, it could be somewhere locally, that can make a big difference in our overall health and this health span that you're talking about.
It makes a huge difference. And, I'm not saying everyone should go to Hawaii. I realize that's not possible. I only get to go, once every couple of years, but we can create that state on the inside. And there's so many different ways to do that. I was just reading a study that I loved. It didn't make it into the book, so here's like some exclusive content. It was a study looking at people who go to the forest and forest bathe. So they go to the forest and they walk for 20 minutes. And within 20 minutes, you change your physiology, you change your cortisol levels, you change your stress response. And that's what we need. Like, our stress response system was not designed to be 24/7 the way that it's set up right now, as you well know. And it's, I think the key is to find these ways to turn on the right genes, silence the genes that accelerate the aging process. And that's really what my book is about.
I love it. It's so powerful. And so something so simple as getting out in nature. And I love that term, forest bathing. I think it's so beautiful.
It's a Japanese term. I love it too.
It's beautiful. Such a simple thing and so effective. And isn't it amazing how something like that can actually change our physiology? It can actually change cortisol levels. It's just quite amazing what it can do.
It's intuitive, but I think, like with many of these practices, for years and before that telomere test, I knew that meditation was a good idea. I knew that I needed to practice yoga every day. I knew that, I needed to eat more dark leafy green vegetables, but I didn't always do it. And so I think finding, my hope is that with knowledge, it really gets people into action. So learning that it's only 20 minutes in the forest that affects a change, to me, that makes it more actionable. Like, if I have a choice between walking on my treadmill or going into the forest near my house for 20 minutes, I'm going to choose the forest. So that's what I hope generates kind of the change in behavior for our listeners.
I love it. It's just so perfect. And I hear you all the way. If I can get out in nature, that's my fix. I just love it. And I think it's something that so many of us can do, is try and do some of these simple things. Something that you write about, which I love. This is there's this island in Greece called Ikaria. And you write about how this community does these simple things that actually has extended their health span and actually longevity as well. Tell us some of the simple things that this community does that we could maybe apply to our lives to improve them and switch off our, the unhealthy genes and turn on our healthy genes.
Well, I love this island. I hope that I get to have a vacation at some point to Ikaria. So they do many different things. The New York Times dubbed this island the island where they forgot to die because they have so many people that are in their hundreds and 90s, and they're not in a nursing home with a walker. They are walking around their mountainous town with no problem. Like, they don't require assistance. So it's a very rocky island, and people are used to hiking and gathering herbs. There's over 100 different types of greens that they eat and drink, make teas out of. Their teas that they make out of these wild herbs are similar to diuretics. They've got medicinal properties. They have a very tight social community. They socialize pretty much every day. They have long, lovely meals. Typically lunch and dinner is 2 hours. And they, in terms of the food that they eat beans, they eat a lot of olive oil. They have a significant amount of goat milk that they consume, and their genes are really designed to do well with that. I don't do well with dairy. I guess my ancient ancestors were not keepers of animals that made milk, because I'm not well adapted to that. It causes inflammation in my body. But those are some of the examples of things they do. They don't wear watches. I stopped wearing a watch because I was inspired by what they do. The idea being that they wake up without an alarm, they get adequate sleep, 7 to 8.5 hours a night, and they are doing all the right things to, kind of live in harmony in this gene environment interaction. And that's the interaction that we want to optimize.
Wow, I love it. One of the aspects that I really liked is the social aspect. They've got these strong social connections, and I think that's something that we need to just keep in mind, especially in this age of the internet and social media, is we need to think about having some actual real life social connections as well.
For sure. I saw an Instagram post that my friend Mark Hyman had that I absolutely loved. And I'm sure your listeners know that he's one of the founders of functional medicine. So Mark had this great post about how medicine is most effectively delivered through our social connections, not by the doctors in the office, but through our social connections. And it's really true. And that can be a positive effect, hanging out with your friends. I love to go with I have a workout buddy that I go running with every Sunday. Now we do yoga. It's like a 3-hour affair. Our husband's, it's taken years to get to this point. But having someone like that who really, helps me habitualize some of these practices really makes a difference. But it can work negatively too. So hanging out with smokers, hanging out with people who have a negative point of view, like those things can also bring down your health. So you want to really think about your social context. And it's, in some ways it's more effective than willpower, which I think is an important point, because willpower is limited.
I agree. Wow, that's interesting that you made that connection there. Yes, because that social connection makes us feel part of something. You're right. You need to surround yourself with people that are going to support what you're doing and live a healthy lifestyle as well.
For sure. There's that adage that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think it's worthwhile just to review who are those 5 people, that you're hanging out with. For me, it's my husband, my daughter, my workout buddy that I try to see a couple times a week, maybe my sisters. So I think about those influences, and they're gigantic. Those are the people I talk to the most on the phone. I hang out with my family every single night. And we also have the power to influence those relationships. My husband and I used to go out for date night once a week, and we'd go on a restaurant tour of this little area we live in, Berkeley, Oakland. And we don't do that anymore. We actually do date night in our sauna, our infrared sauna. And we chant and we do, we talk, we get emotionally current. So we have the power to also influence those social connections.
I love it. Tell us a little bit more about sauna and the benefits of getting in a sauna.
I feel like a zealot for saunas. Oh my gosh. So there was a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that just made me do the happy dance. It was because it was a study of this enormous group of Finnish men. And you can never do this study in the US because people just don't do saunas enough. But in Finland, they do saunas regularly. And I'm part Finnish, so I'm into this. And they followed these men, this large group of men, they were aged 40 to 65. They followed them for 29 to 30 years. And they found, I feel like I need a drum roll here. They found that the men who have a sauna for at least 20 minutes, 4 to 7 times a week, had a 40% decreased mortality. That is dramatic. Like there is nothing else. Yeah, drum roll. I feel like that is so dramatic. And when you look at cardiovascular mortality, you know, the number one killer of people over 50, it reduces cardiovascular mortality by 50%.
That's powerful.
So it's very powerful, and it turns on the FOXO3 gene. It's one of those genes that I think is easier to remember. Many of the genes sound like license plates. They're very difficult to remember. But FOXO3, I want you to remember, because this is a gene that gets rid of misfolded proteins. It gets rid of debris in your body. It helps to slow down the aging process, lengthen health span. And the sauna itself, just in terms of its effect, it's almost like moderate exercise because it raises your heart rate. In fact, it's a form of exercise that they give to people who have heart failure, for instance, who just can't tolerate, you know, getting on a bike or walking. And it has this profound effect on your body. It's almost like as close to a panacea as you can find when it comes to your health. It's detoxifying. It's especially good for me because I have the MTHFR mutation, and I need a little boost in terms of my ability to detoxify.
There's so many things I want to follow up on there. So for people who may not know what the MTHFR gene is and why using a sauna might help, tell us a little bit more about the whole detox aspect with this gene.
So this is kind of a complicated gene. There's a lot of good sources of information. In fact, I think your Anxiety Summit has really covered the MTHFR very well. I call it the detox gene. You could also call it the methylation gene. So what it does is it specifically works on vitamin B9, and it helps with the detoxification pathways in the body. So I have a mutation with one of the genes. There's about 12 of them, but one of the main genes, and it just makes me not detoxify well. So the way that I feel it is that I can have fatigue, increased risk of depression. I had my first episode of depression when I was in my 20s, another postpartum. I also, when I drink alcohol, I don't detoxify well, and that's very common when you have an MTHFR mutation. So I need to work around this gene, similar to some of the things that you've talked about, like with pyroluria and being, you know, you need to take vitamin B6, and you have this on your blog, so I hope I'm not revealing confidential information.
And that's perfect. I like to talk about it. Yes.
Okay. Well, we can talk about that gene as well, but you take extra zinc and vitamin B6. So with me, I need to take methylated folate, and you know, some people don't do well with that when they have MTHFR mutations, but it's something that works really well for me. And that's the kind of, you know, biochemical individuality that we want to be paying attention to when we're looking at the gene environment interaction. So I have about a 40 to 65% reduction in the enzyme that deals with methylation in this process of how B9 works in my body. And so I need to work around it. And that's why I take methylated folate.
Great. And thanks for sharing that. And I personally have one of the MTHFR polymorphisms myself, and I think that played a role in the anxiety and the panic attacks that I experienced. So something simple like using the methylated folate can help some people, but then using something like a sauna to help enhance your detoxification is so simple. So I think it's so important that we need to make the point that we may have some of these gene defects, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to resign our fact to the fact that we've going to have some problems. There's something that we can actually do about it, and this is what the message that you're trying to share, that we've got these genetic defects or polymorphisms, but there's something we can actually do about it with some of these simple things that you're teaching.
Well, I think that's the most sacred part of this book and the new field of epigenetics. You know, this idea that what I was taught in medical school was that you're stuck with the genes you have. So yes, you are stuck with the genes you have, but we can affect the way those genes talk to the rest of your body in such profound ways. In fact, if you look at the, kind of your risk of chronic disease, the diseases that really kill you, about 10% of your risk of that disease, those diseases, is genetic, and 90% is your environment. So not all of that is modifiable. Some has to do with how your body responds to exposures, but much of it is modifiable. And so we want to focus on that 90% of the environment that we can make a difference with.
That's powerful. But then knowing that you've got some of these defects can help motivate you to want to make some of those lifestyle changes. So I really appreciate the fact that you're highlighting some of these. I like that you've talked about some of the genes that actually affect our stress levels. So with my community and anxiety being a big factor, and pretty much everyone is exposed to stressful situations. So if you've got these genes, you can know that there's something that you can do. You don't have to say, well, I've got these genes, therefore I'm going to just be a stressed, anxious person. But if you make some of these lifestyle changes, you can actually switch some of them off. Can you talk a little bit about some of the genes that play into feeling stress more than maybe the average person?
Sure. Yeah, I have a whole chapter on soothing, like how you can really soothe kind of based on your genes. And I talk a lot about the genes that I have polymorphisms for. Pretty much everybody has 3 to 5 significant genes that they need to pay attention to. And I want to pick up on that point that you made about knowing your genetics, like how motivating it is, because in some ways there's nothing more enchanting than really understanding your own physiology, whether that's genetic or, a functional medicine laboratory panel. It makes such a difference, I think, to know your specifics and use that as a benchmark, a base case from which you can then make changes. So one of the genes that I talk about a lot is the gene that we think about as kind of the soul wound gene. And I'm going to get a little quieter here because this one's pretty profound. It's been studied mostly in Holocaust survivors. So this gene in particular, FK something, 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 I can't remember exactly the whole thing, but this gene gets turned on by severe trauma. We don't know if lesser trauma also turns it on. I grew up with an alcoholic parent and some emotional abuse. I don't know if my gene got turned on, but I suspect it probably did and has led to some issues that I've had later on. Mm-hmm. But this gene in particular can get turned on. For instance, in the Holocaust, they've looked at the children of people who are Holocaust survivors, and it's turned on in the children. Mm-hmm. So it gets activated by severe trauma, and then epigenetics, kind of the non-DNA changes to the way that your DNA is expressed, that can then be inherited by future generation, creating a soul wound. There's also been studies looking at people who survived 9/11 who are pregnant, and they found that women who are pregnant, their children then have this gene turned on, and they're also seeing an increased risk of post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think is really relevant for people who struggle with anxiety. Mm-hmm. So there's other stress genes as well. The TH gene, I joke about a lot. It's a gene that gets turned on and makes you stressed if you're exposed to cold. And I grew up in Maryland where it got pretty cold, and then I moved to Alaska where I was cold most of the time. And now I live in Northern California, which is a much better fit for me. It's probably one of the reasons why I love Hawaii so much. It just helps me turn off that gene, the TH gene. So those are a few of the genes. There's many more. In fact, I have one here that I looked up for you. We'll have to come up with a name for it. It's the way that they describe the SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms, is usually RS and then a number. So this gene is RS6330. It's on the NGF gene. And this is a gene that relates to vagal tone, so how your vagus is working. So RS6330, and I found out, I looked at this and I saw that people who are CC, so they inherited one C allele from one parent and another C allele from the other parent, that creates more anxious females and less anxious males. And the TT form, one T from one parent, another T allele from the other parent, that creates more anxious males, less anxious females. And I looked at that and I thought for sure I was a CC. Turns out I'm the normal, the wild type CT. So that's one of the few genes that I did not inherit a defect for. But I imagine for a lot of the folks who struggle with anxiety, they may not know that they have this particular gene defect. And they may not know that, there's so many strategies that you can use to improve the way that your vagus works in your body. So that's another stress gene I wanted to share with you.
And just repeat the name of that gene again.
So it's the NGF gene, and it's the SNP ID is RS6330.
Perfect. I'll make sure that we share that when I share this with my community. And this is a perfect lead in to vagus nerve and how you can support it, because you mentioned it earlier. Before we go there, I just wanted to ask you about testing, because I know this question is going to come up. If you're talking about some of these genes, what would someone do? Do they need to even test? So you talked about having a baseline. And then also I'd like to just find out about the telomere testing, because I'm sure some folks are going to say, well, I want to test my telomeres as well and see what they're doing. So let's do that, and then let's talk a little bit about the vagus nerve.
Sure. So for genetic testing, turns out that about more than 99% of our genes are the same person to person. You don't have to do genetic testing to benefit greatly from the younger protocol that I lay out in the book. So genetic testing is not required. It's funny, I have a best friend who is not a scientist. She's not in health. And every time I write a book, she's one of my early readers. And she said to me, there's no way I want to do genetic testing. I've heard too many scary things. I just don't want to know that I have the Alzheimer's gene. I don't want to know, about all this bad stuff. I'd rather just do what I can with your protocol and just hope for the best in terms of my epigenetics. So there's a group of people that I think really benefit from approaching it that way. Then there's people who are more like me, and I suspect you, yes, who want as much information as possible. Like learning turns us on, and we want to have that feeling of just the excitement of knowing our physiology. So for those people, I actually created a pretty dense appendix going through the top 7 genes and what you can do depending on your results. And so there's a little bit for everybody. So for people who want to test, I think one of the best tests is 23andMe. I mean, they've really established it pretty well. They don't have the best reporting. The FDA here in the States shut them down, and now they have kind of limited reporting on 36 conditions.
Yep.
So that story is still evolving. Part of the problem with the FDA was that there was some questions about the accuracy of the genetic testing, and 23andMe wasn't very responsive in getting back to the FDA about the way that they read their test results, the way that they report them, and so the FDA had an injunction on them. So whenever there's some accuracy questions, I just encourage our people to have some pause and, sort of caution about testing. Tim Ferriss, for instance, recommends that people use a pseudonym when they do any genetic testing because of, not feeling like privacy laws are as bulletproof as we would hope. I'd never like to send people to just one lab. So another lab that I like a lot is pathway.com. And then there's a lab in Australia that I love called Smart DNA. They're one of my favorites. Again, I totally love their reporting. I think Pathway and Smart DNA have the best reporting out there. And they also include all the citations, which, again, just thrills me, like raises my oxytocin. And we want that. That's another really good counter to stress. So your next question was about telomeres. So my favorite place for getting your telomeres tested is a place called LifeLength. And this is a lab that's based in Spain. When I first had my telomeres tested when I was 44, I got it done through SpectraCell. And that's where I found that at 44, I was 64 years old. I did test again, just to kind of give the punchline here. I did test again a few months ago. So at 49, I had the telomeres of a 52-year-old. So I'd closed the gap 17 years. Hooray for that. And we've also taken this protocol and have had 1,000 people go through it. And they, on average, added about 10 years to their health span. So I love to have evidence and proof that something works. That's really important to me. So should we talk about the vagus?
Yes, but I just a few things about that. That's so cool to get the before and the after. And I love that you've taken people through this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end, because there's going to be some people here who are going to say, well, I want to do this. I can read the book. That's great, but I need some hand holding. So at the end, let's make sure we talk about the program. You're going to be offering a program again once you launch this book, correct?
Yes, for sure. Yes, we want people to have the support they need. I mean, we just talked about social context, having a community to go through this with and not feel like you're alone can really make a difference. Having a start date really, I think, helps motivate. So yes, for sure, we offer that. And I would love to riff with you because you're an expert at the vagus too. So maybe we could go back and forth with some suggestions about what helps the vagus. But does everyone already know about the vagus? Should we talk a little bit about what it does?
Yes, let's start with that in case there are people who don't know. And then, I'd love to hear some tips, and I'll just share some things that I learned when I had my vagus nerve issues too. Great.
Okay, good. Yeah, both of us have had vagus issues. So the vagus is the longest nerve in the body. I think of it as mostly being an agent of the parasympathetic nervous system. Your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system has two halves: the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, flight, freeze, and then the parasympathetic rest and digest. So the vagus is involved in both, but it's the most important nerve of the parasympathetic. So that kind of makes sense. It's involved in helping you calm down. And people who have problems with their gut, with their stress response, with brain function, with their voice, which maybe we can talk about a little bit, like all of these things are indicators that you may have an issue with your vagus because it's involved in so many different parts of the body: the brain, the throat, tongue, larynx, pharynx, esophagus, your heart. I mean, you can pretty much every organ, your gallbladder, it secretes bile, your liver, your spleen, it helps to reduce inflammation, your gut, it's involved in motility, stomach acid production. It's involved in so many different things. So I'm leaving out, probably half of it, but anything you want to add to what the vagus does?
Blood sugar control.
Yes. The pancreas. Yes.
So
huge.
You see the chart of the vagus nerve, and you just see this where it's going, all throughout the body. It's quite incredible the impacts that it has. So tell us some, your experience with vagus nerve, and then I'll share mine, and then I'd love to hear some tips from you on how you can improve vagus nerve tone.
Yeah, so, people who have low vagal tone, which is something that I've struggled with in the past, are more likely to have anxiety. They're more likely to have gut issues, digestive issues, especially the irritable bowel syndrome, the constipation type, and voice problems. So, the solution is actually very intuitive. We can talk about some of these strategies that help to improve vagal tone: meditation, prayer, chanting. I chant. I think I joked about this, that I chant as my date night in the sauna with my husband. And I'm serious about that. Like, just chanting Om can help to improve vagal tone. It's pretty significant. Prayer, whatever helps you get into that state, the relaxation response that Herb Benson talks about, kind of that physiologic state where you have a deep sense of calm. So deep belly breathing. My younger daughter, when she was 5 years old, I remember she came to me when I published my first book, and she said, "Mom, I learned how to do balloon breathing. Do you want to know how to do it?" And she demonstrated inhaling, letting her belly expand, and exhaling, let her belly go back to her spine. And I was so thrilled. She's like, "You got to do 5 of them." And it's true. It just transforms your nervous system. It activates the vagus nerve. So those are a few of my favorites. Yoga, of course, increases vagal tone. But why don't you jump in and say some of your favorites?
So everything that you've just talked about was wonderful. And for me, I had an issue where I had a really scary plane ride, and I think I was exposed to a virus on the plane, and I got back home, and I had this bad flu and was pretty sick for a few days, but managed to knock that out in about a week. But the bad voice continued, and I had these spasms in my throat. And for me, it was humming, singing, so that getting out there and using the voice. I couldn't do too much. If I overdid it, then it actually got worse. And then I also used GABA sublingually, which relaxed the spasms in the throat, because I did get these spasms, and after talking for about 10 minutes I was starting to go like this, and I couldn't talk because my throat was contracting. So and I think the important thing that what I could see your face light up when you talked about getting in the sauna and chanting. I think it's important to find something that really fires you up and do that, because you can't think, well, I must do this 5 times a day, or I must do this. It's got to be something, I'm so excited to start going and doing this. Like, I'm excited to get out in nature, and, doing something that really fires you up, I think is really important.
That is important. I remember when you were struggling with your voice, and I'm so glad it's so strong today. You were, you made a video where you were humming Happy Birthday, and you were singing to someone in particular, like you really had your sister maybe.
Yes, it was my baby sister.
Yeah. And that's another important one. So social connections, once again, activate vagal tone. Maybe oxytocin has something to do with that. And I think that's such an important one. For me, one of the things I do is I call girlfriends. There was an email that went viral about a professor of psychiatry at Stanford who said, if you're a man and you want to improve your health, be with a woman. If you're a woman and you want to improve your health, be with your girlfriends. Because being with women helps with the vagal tone. I mean, it just makes such a difference. So I really love that. Another one is sleeping on your right side. The worst for vagal tone is sleeping on your back. And from my book, Younger, I also learned that the glymphatic system, the system that helps to remove debris and gets environmental toxins out of your brain, it acts like a brain shampoo. That works better sleeping on your side versus back sleeping. So I really encourage people to sleep on their side, their right side.
That was a new one for me. So it was fascinating. So much about just pulling it all together, because when I had my issues, I was told to do some of these things and I didn't quite understand why, like the singing the happy birthday, remembering my sister when she was 10 years old or 12 years old, I can't remember. And I didn't realize it was the social aspect that was important. So pulling that together for me is helpful. So thanks for sharing that. And
well, it healed you. It worked.
It worked. I know. Sometimes you don't have to know why. You just have to do it. But I like the whys. I like to know the mechanisms. I like to know, as you say, the testing, the before and the after. And we've got, I'm just a curious mind. And that's why I loved your book. I just thought it was so practical, and yet it had so much meat in it in terms of the whys and the, just so much. Loved it. Really brilliant book. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. Well, the whys matter a lot to me. And, I think that's a fundamental question. If you learn nothing else today, I hope that you start with your why for why you want to lengthen health span. Like, why do you care about time being on your side? Why do you care about living a long life? For my husband, he jokes he wants to eat more lemon ricotta pancakes. That's his why. He wants to travel and he wants to go to Italy this summer and go bicycling. And for me, it's more about, well, I want to, have a really amazing marriage for many decades. And I want to be involved in my children's lives and take care of my grandchildren. Like, my why is a little bit different. We all have different whys.
Beautiful. What a beautiful ending. This has been so great. I would like you to just talk a little bit about this program that you've got coming up. And what I'll do when I share this, I'll include a link so people who want to get a copy of the book can actually come to your website and sign up. And they've got access to some goodies if they do that. So once you purchase it, you can enter the purchase code, and then you get access to some goodies. Tell us what you are having, what you're making available for folks who do this.
So when you submit a receipt for getting the book online or at your local bookstore, you get the Younger Quick Start Guide. So for instance, if you purchase online or you pre-order the book, you can get a way to jump in right away while you wait for the book to come. It also gives you a roadmap, I always like to have a mind map, kind of a picture of where it is I'm going and what are each of the steps. So we give you a roadmap, and then we give you a $17 coupon in our store. The idea being it's about the cost of the book on Amazon. And so we wanted to reward you and thank you for purchasing. So those are the 3 things you get. And yeah, we're really excited to help people lengthen their health span and to take this kind of complicated area of the gene and how it talks to the rest of your body and the top 7 genes associated with aging, and to really take you by the hand and help you make those daily decisions that are relatively small, but they add up to major transformation over time.
Beautiful. And now once people sign up for this gift, they will hear about the training that you are going to be holding, correct?
So if you want to go further, if you want to go through our training, we've got a 7-day younger challenge. So it's only 7 days. You don't have to make a huge commitment. And it's the most powerful levers from the book. So it takes you through the 7 most important steps for lengthening your health span and getting some of those benefits that we've talked about of living longer and preventing disease. For people who want to go further, there's the option later on to do the 7-week protocol, but I don't necessarily suggest starting off with that. I think the 7-day challenge, the younger challenge, is a good place to start.
Wonderful. You've got us covered for everything. Read the book, read the 7-day, then think about doing the 7-week. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Sara. It's wonderful. Any final words of wisdom that you want to share with us today? I think you've shared so much already, but just want to give you the opportunity to end on a high note.
Well, I want to honor you, Trudy, for the work that you do. I was thinking about health span and when should you start caring about it. And I love that your website is about, every woman over 29, because I think, a lot of people don't realize that Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer, many of the changes start in your body in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. And that's the time where we want to be making changes that affect your health span. So I just want to encourage people to kind of take that vision of, their future self. For instance, I think a lot about, I just turned 50, as I mentioned, I think about myself at 70 and 75. And I want to make decisions that are incredibly kind to her. I don't want her to, need a knee replacement or to struggle with her blood sugar. I want to make the decisions today that are kind to her. So that's what I want to leave our listeners with. How can you be kind to your future self?
Beautiful. Thanks, Dr. Sara. Congratulations again on your new book, Younger, a breakthrough program to reset your genes, reverse aging, and turn back the clock 10 years. I'm really excited to be sharing it and this wonderful interview with my community. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Trudy. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Sara. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this great interview. This is Trudy Scott signing off.